Yes, thank you. So for this morning's lesson, um, I want to share. I've been trying to share about this misogynistic incels, but I've not been successful in completing this presentation. But I want to share the way they actually view women and how actually they think, and how is it also related to the Sunday law, and how is it also how has it affected actually the left wing. So there's a lot of things that I want to share, and there's a lot of things in my thoughts as well that are just playing around. And we're looking at um, the crisis that is just before us, which is the Sunday law. This morning, I was listening to the High Commissioner, Michelle. Um, Michelle. So she said something that is actually interesting, but also scary. When she was asked if does she see the um, human right uh, commissioner or the human rights making any progress, she said no. Actually, there's no much progress that is actually being made. Instead, it's actually deteriorating. It's like it's going down. No progress has been made. So I was so okay. I may not say I was shocked, but then it's quite alarming that um, it's happening at such a high rate that the human rights laws are actually disregarded almost by many nations and many leaders actually. So I want to begin with this statement that was shared by uh, in the article on the newsletter, and this was from it is actually what Doreen stated in her first words. She said, "It is seriously intriguing how this final test has come. It is just not what we thought it would be. Our minds were fixed on the Sabbath Sunday test. It made us blind to the obvious inhumane activities around us. We were abused and were abusers of others. With our eyes fixed steadily as or on heaven, choosing to turn a blind eye to suffering humanity around us. What a seriously holier than thou attitude." So what she's pointing out, she was I would put it like this, that we were focusing too much on the four commandments and we disregarded the six commandments. Our eyes were fixed on God and we forgot humanity. So when you look at the commandments, that's what we used to actually look at, and how we used to view even our relationship with God. We would be we would not be considering the human beings which we actually live with. We would be focused on the spiritual and forgetting about the natural. So I don't know if these birds are making that much noise. Uh, can, so yeah, those are the words that she shared, and I wanted to start with those words. And when you go down, she says many powerful points that are worth consideration, especially when we are actually making decisions each and every day when we look at our relationship with God, and the decisions that we are actually making, they are actually impacting us either for heaven or for to remain on this earth when Christ comes. So there's a lot that is happening, and as much as those things are actually happening, we need to understand where we stand and what we are actually standing for. So when you look at what is happening externally, it is actually calling to our attention what we need to be also focusing on. So, what is the purpose of this lesson? The purpose of this lesson, it is actually to understand how this movement, the the men's movement, is actually rising up, and how actually it's having similar ideas because of the same ideas that this misogynist incel movement is having of being anti-feminist. Is the same views that actually the MRM, the men's right movement, is actually having, being anti-feminist, actually seeing feminism as a threat to them, wanting to restore um, a social order, so to say, by saying that women, they need to know their place, all those things, and how they even uh, describe women, and with words that are actually dehumanizing a woman. So that's maybe one point. We want to look at how they actually think, and how the way they actually behave, and what actually the acts that actually they are committing to show what is within them, the grievances they have towards women. And I want to share this from this perspective. I want to give a perspective of what exactly is, I think it's actually causing heartache for them when we look at how feminism has actually developed, and and us saying that we are actually radical feminists. So I want to give this perspective. So the perspective I would like to give, it's to start with. Am I still? Okay. So the perspective I want to give, it's actually to start with with the waves of feminism. So there's an article by Vox. It shares that there are actually four uh, waves of feminism. You have the first wave of feminism, and then you have the second wave of feminism, and you have the third wave, and the fourth wave, which is actually today. So when you look at the first wave, right? The first wave would be the one that actually they were fighting for the right to vote. And when when you look at the second wave, there are many things that the second wave actually managed to achieve. And I want to read some of those things that they actually managed to achieve. So let me send this Vox article. Let me just share this Vox article with you so that you can be able to follow as I'm actually reading. So I'm sending to Zoom. Yeah. So I want to focus on the second wave. because it's the second wave that actually um, went deep into the social issues. Like when you look at what they were standing up for, they were standing up for the right to have birth control, to use birth control, the right to education, and the laws that were pointing out issues like marital rape and the awareness about domestic violence. Because when you look at the first wave did not actually bring these issues to the forefront. They were actually focusing on specifically about their right to vote, and people who are actually women, and it's actually white women, black women by that time period. There were still black people, they were still under this segregation, like you had your Jim Crow long to it. So when we speak about this, the first wave and the second wave, we need to bear in mind that actually the people who are actually fighting the most, it's actually white working class women, and they are they are fighting to have the right to go to work, to have a pay slip, to have credit cards, to have mortgage, all those things. So I just want to read something from the second wave, starting from which is the second wave started from 1963 to the 1980s. It says the second wave of feminism begins with Teresa Fass, the feminist mystic, which came out of the 1963. They were prominent feminist thinkers before the Freudian, who would come to the to be associated with the second wave. Most important, Simeon de Beauvoir, whose second sex came out in France 1949 and in the US in 1953. So jumping the paragraph, coming to the second paragraph. The feminist mystic rallies against the problem that has no name. The mystic sexism, or the systematic sexism that taught women that their place has in the home was in the home, and that if they were unhappy as housewives, it was only because they were broken and perverse. I thought there was something wrong with me being because I did not have an orgasm waging the kitchen floor. So, and then the third paragraph, it says, but she argued the fault did not truly lie with women, but rather the world that refused to allow them to exercise their creative and intellectual faculties. Women were right to be unhappy. They were being ripped off. So that's one of the uh, 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 one of the feminists. She's actually arguing why are they actually um, so unhappy. And one of the things is they were unhappy. Okay, like it says, they were unhappy And the reason of them being unhappy, it was because of the systematic sexism that actually taught women that their place is to be at home, meaning they are not to work, but they have to be good housewives. You see, so the argument is that they don't want to have to be domestic or to be within the workplace. So World War II, that the second wave is taking place. So they have tasted the to working, like they have tasted on how does it feel to actually work, because of, remember, um, during those world wars, many men will be sent away, and the women will be left behind to actually take care of the family. So women, they are actually blamed for for being unhappy, and they are actually blamed for 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 other things, like for wanting to actually work. So they are actually blamed, and um, the men are actually victims in this case. So when you read the what made the feminism to be actually unified, we can read the the fourth paragraph. Let's read the third paragraph for. So let's read the fifth paragraph. It says, and once those 3 million readers realized that they were angry, feminism once again had cultural momentum behind it. It had a unifying goal too, not just political equality, which the first wave had fought for, but social equality also. So the first wave was actually fighting for political equality, which actually they managed to pass at least. And when you look at the second wave actually was focusing more actually on the social equality. So the fifth the sixth paragraph, it says, the personal is political said that the second wave, the phrase cannot be traced back to any individual woman, but was popularized by Carol Hanisch. They would go on to argue that the problems that seemed to be individual and petty, about sex and relationships and access to abortion and domestic labor were in fact systematic and political and fundamental to the fight for women's equality. So there are many things when you are actually looking at the social structure that was there. And when you look at the social structure, you go to science, go to technology, you go to the presidency, you go to anything in the world, the system that is actually in play at that time, it's actually the patriarchal system, the structure. It's built within patriarchy. And you go to the families, you go to anything that actually it's about making us what we are. It was actually patriarchal. So they see what is happening in the homes in which they are actually living in, and they see how actually the society is actually built, and they look at how the nation is built, and they see that actually this problem, it's actually it's not an individual issue, but it's an issue that actually it's facing all women who um who are actually uh, who are actually the working class. In that sense, them, which are the white women who are actually fighting. So you have terms like the personal is political, and we know, and we have that the studies have been made on the personal is political. Um, I'm not gonna focus on that. So we have victories that actually the second wave actually won. So before I come to the victories that they have won, is that you need to bear in mind the patriarchal structure that was in place. And the patriarchal system that was in place was actually favorable to men. When you go, when you read it, like you will have words like it was men's world. As today, you can be able to say that it is still men's world, even though women are actually making those progresses. But now it is no longer making so much progresses. Instead, there's 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 a reversal of that progress. So what actually these men are fighting for, it's to retain or to keep the social structure, and they look at what those men were actually fighting for, and they actually desire those social structures, that a woman's place it's in a home, and within a home the woman must just keep quiet. She has no say, even if she's been abused, even if she's actually been raped, she just needs to be quiet and be grateful for for having even the husband. So the minds of these rising attacks or this backlash against feminism, it is actually within the framework of retaining the patriarchal system. So we are going to read the victories that they managed to achieve. So when you read the seventh paragraph, it speaks about it says, so the movement won some major legislation and legal victories. The Equal Pay Act uh, theoretically outlawed the gender pay gap. A series of landmark Supreme Court cases through the 1960s gave married and unmarried women the right to use birth control. Title, is it Title 6 or Title 7? But yeah, gave women the right to educational equality. And in 1973, Roe versus Wade guaranteed women reproductive freedom. So when I look at all this and I look at today, I don't see much change actually. It is just within the papers, if I can put it like that. Because if maybe we look at Roe versus Wade, it has been overturned. When we look at the issue of pay gap, it's still the same. Men are preferred and are more, they are more getting, they are paid more than women for the same job. Maybe a practical example was the recent issue that with the Bafana and the women's team. They are playing the same sport. they are playing for the same nation, but they were paid. The women team actually was paid less than what this men's team was actually paid. And when you look at how the progress that the women's team made, it was able to achieve so much than what this men's team have ever achieved. So there's there's that equal pay. Even today, it's not like it has went away. Some of the things, they are just within the papers, but not much progress has been made. And when you look at the laws about okay, the one of birth control, okay, it's gonna be challenged, as Thomas Clarence had said. That's the things they want to look at. And you have educational equality. When you go to engineering schools, women are still being mistreated. They are being harassed. They are being forced to sleep with the lectures. When you go to universities lectures, they actually seek to sleep with the young girls who are actually are doing the courses, or they are doing actually their bachelor's or degrees at those universities. So you see how women, even within these places or uh, edu educational sectors, or so there are actually not much that has changed. So Shamiso, am I too fast?
No, you're fine.
Okay, so I will open this up for questions, for any contributions. I just want to read uh, other victories that they actually managed to win. So when you actually read paragraph 9, it says, worked on getting women the right to hold credit cards under their own names and to apply for mortgage. Um, it worked to outlaw marital rape, to raise awareness about domestic violence and build shelters for women fleeing rape and domestic violence. It worked to name and legislate against sexual harassment in the workplace. So consider all these positive work that actually the second wave, which we say this is actually the radical feminist perspective, or what we need to actually adopt. It's when you look at them and what they managed to achieve, it is so what they managed to achieve, it was so great. Because when you look today in some countries, marital rape, it's still uh, no men are still not held accountable for marital rape. And it's been how many years? It's been almost 50. How many years? Almost 50 years. 50, yeah, almost 50 years. 52 years. And imagine, even after 50 years, women who are actually married, they still face marital rape. And second wave was addressing that 50 years ago. And today, we are living in the 21st century, and this we still are facing the same problem that which actually the second wave was actually facing. They were getting victories. Are we making any victories in this today's society? Or are we actually stagnant? Or are we actually moving backwards? So it really calls to mind the progress of the rights of women. Is there any development that are actually taking place to women's rights? Women's rights, it's human rights. So is there any progress that is being made? And I doubt if there's much progress that is being made. So when you look at what actually they were fighting for, it's what we are actually so alarmed when we see all these abuses happening in the world, and women are actually being harassed, are being are being abused. They are actually are denied their rights. And when you look at that, it is something else. And with what actually Doreen says in her words there, truly, should we as a people whom God actually has entrusted so much truth, should we be ignorant of what is actually happening in the world? Should we be ignorant of the ill treatment of women today? Are we going to turn a blind eye and act as if we do not see what is actually happening? Are we going to say, it's not my problem? No, it's a family problem. What are we going to do? So it's a question that probably one can ask and needs to answer if they say they are actually radical feminists. If radical feminists saw a need in their time to be able to build shelters for women who were actually running away from rape, from 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 their oppressors, if they were able to see a need of building shelters for them, how much more the people who are living at the end of the world and who are actually faced with a society that is so sickened by sin. Yeah. Let's continue. So the feminist mistake and its problem that has no name, specifically for white middle class women, women who had worked to support themselves, experienced their oppression very differently from the women who were socially discouraged from working. Earning the right to work outside the home was not a major concern for Black women, many of whom had to work outside the home anyway. And while Black women and white women both advocated for reproductive freedom, Black women wanted to fight not just for the right to contraception and abortions, but also to stop the forced sterilization of people of color and people with disability, which was not a priority for the mainstream women's movement. In response, some Black feminists campaigned from feminism or decayed from feminism to create womanism. Womanist is the feminist as purple is to the violet. So you see, one will say this, where the white women in the second wave, were they racist? That's a question that can arise, and many people would say yes, they were actually very racist. But when you look at the context of their time, and you look at what was actually happening within their time, what white women they were actually facing, it was twice as much when it gets to the black people or black women. It was so much. Imagine sterilization. It was so horrible that actually what they were going through. But when you look at the second wave, its flaws, one can argue, its flaws and its mistakes in those times cannot do away with what they have managed to achieve and what actually they were fighting for. We know that it was not for all women, but it was for a certain class of women. And what we need to look at, it's also the time period, their time period as well, which was actually so much disadvantageous because of when you look at black people, when you look at the time, you look at it is black people were still under the systematic discrimination as a whole. There were still the Jim Crow laws were still in place, and segregation was there. And either way, women would be forced to go and work outside. So there were black people were still considered as subhumans, you see. And when you look at the civil rights movement, when you look at the people, like the men who were actually fighting for the civil rights movement, they were actually also sexist, even in their thinking. And it's within the third wave that we see the women of color being able to voice out their grievances or the pains they have endured because of the level of the society being able to open up from what it used to be. So when you look at the second wave, the second wave was managed to achieve many of the things that were actually which we actually discussed. So any questions, any additions before I proceed?
Hi, Thato.
Okay. Hi.
Ududu has a comment.
What can you do?
Hi, Thato. Hi, everyone. I felt the pain yesterday. I was in town, and then the young lady In fact, I was in a taxi sitting next to the other lady. And then there was a young woman wearing a short skirt at the taxi rank. All the taxi drivers were whistling and shouting at her. Everyone was harassing her. I felt the pain because I saw that women are not supporting each other. And then the lady who was sitting next to me said, "Why is she wearing like this?" And then I said, why are you not helping her if it's wrong? And then I felt that if it was a white woman, they wouldn't do like that, because she's a black woman, and then she's young, she's wearing a short skirt, then they harassed her. So I felt that pain yesterday. So I looked at it and then I said, yeah, it's the men's world. The society that we are living in is the men's world, and the society is against us. Yes, that's what I wanted to comment about.
Thank you, Tutu. It's very painful, you know. It's very, very painful. Yeah. Any other comment? Actually, what Tutu is saying, it's also tied and connected to why actually feminism is actually failing today. So we will, I will just dissect a little bit and then speak about that and then come back and then continue. So, and then try to wrap up. So when you look at the victories of the second wave and what this this misogynic incels or this white male supremacist ideology is actually built on. It's built on reversing this social progress that the second wave actually managed to achieve. And when you look at when you look at the 11th paragraph, it says, I just want to read something here. So it says, even after the picture free abortion, it says, even with its limited scope, second wave feminism at its height was plenty radical enough to scare people. Hence the myth of the bra bands. Despite the popular story, there was no mass banning of bras among second wave feminists. But women did gather together in 1968 to protest the Miss American pageant and its demeaning patriarchal treatment of women. Remember, there's a lesson that Elder Tess did the other time, and then she was actually pointing out how women in this American Miss Pageant were actually called. They were called cows. They were called animals. You see, and this issue of calling people who are actually seen as less human, it's so popular within those who are actually seeing themselves as being the superiors. I would make few examples, like when you look at the first wave feminism, we know that women within first wave, they were actually called all these sorts of names, from being ugly, from being um, which is all these names that were so inhumane. They were called by. So you look at the first wave, women were dehumanized and they were animalized. Second wave, it's the same thing. You go to the third wave, you come to the fourth wave. But it's within the first and the second wave where you actually see that. And when you look at this this misogynic this movement, this men's right movement, is that they share the same sentiments of calling women with these names that are actually dehumanizing and animalizing them. So imagine being called a cow, and yet you are actually in front of many people. How much painful is that? So yeah, and continue reading. And as part of the protest, participants ceremoniously threw away objects that they considered to be symbols of women's objectification, including bras and copies of Playboy, and many others. It is issues such as um, anything that actually objectified women, the beauty standards that actually men wanted the women to look like. Like you had your isn't it, your rouges, your all these things that actually uh, would will be teamed to make a woman to be beautiful. So when you look at the second wave and it going against the beauty standard that was in place and how women were actually uh, told or they were taught to behave and to be like, and how to actually dress and how actually they need to conduct themselves. You see the woman actually going against such behavior, which is actually built within a patriarchy. We can say it's patriarchal treatment. You see, so that's one thing when you are actually moving down, coming to the close of the second wave feminism, and it I just want to read these other two paragraphs. It says that Miss American protest has long lingered in the popular imagination as a bra banning, and that bra banning has become a my metonym post-war. American feminism says a lot about backlash to the second wave that would soon ensue. So when you look at the 1980s, when you look at the 1980s and the progress that the second wave has made, the Reagan era management, the conservative group, they began now to start to maneuver ways on how they can call women. It says the paragraph says in the 1980s, the comfortable conservatism of the Reagan era managed to successfully position second wave feminism as humorless, um, humorless. What does humorless mean? It's lack of humor, not able to appreciate, express no humor. So they called, one of the things they called second wave is that, these women, they are actually, they don't appreciate. They are so humorless. And they they were animalized, like the hairy legged stew. When you look at this hairy legged, it's like, a bat, ngesiZulu, ngesiXhosa kuthiwa lilulwane, but a bat, it has those long legs. And the stew, there's this other animal, it's small, it's like a rat. I think it's like a rat. It has a long nose. It's the stew. So you see, now they begin to um, use these animals. Is it animals? But yeah, these small animals, and they begin to use these animals to compare them to these women, to the women. Which women are they actually being compared with these animals? Are these women whom actually have been fighting the patriarchal system? They have been fighting um, the beauty pageant and the beauty standards that were in place. Now, you see now, when they are being compared to these animals, as when you look at those small in animals, they are not they are not looking nice. And it is so umtiaktuka when uses such names actually. But we see them being animalized, and they were called to say that they only care about their bullshit, which is actually bra banning. And then instead of this, it says instead of really rally problems, probably to distract themselves from the loneliness of their lives, since no man would want a feminist. So first of all, they are called they are called that they are actually lonely, and they are dehumanized, they are animalized, they are not appreciating, they are they are called bitter, they are unhappy, they are less of women, they are unattractive. So that's what actually this Reagan administration, or the Reagan management, the Reagan era managed to paint a picture of this second wave feminist. Just like when you go back to the first wave feminists, you remember that they would be called the suffragettes. They will be called, there will be pictures of them having big mouth, big lips, long necks, skinny, with pimples, all these um, ugly pictures you can think of, they will be pictured with. And they will be called, they have big noses. And one thing that I've learned about this big nose, it has a symbol of being, it has a symbol behind. So all these things they were painting a picture of women. And it was a very, very nasty picture, which they actually painted. And when you look at there was an in so the following paragraph said, I don't think myself as a feminist. So there was a lady who was actually interviewed, and she was asked, do you consider yourself to be a feminist? This is actually in 1982. And then she said, no, I don't consider myself to be a feminist. Why? Because of uh, what is the man next door or my neighbor going to say? He's going to tell me that the reason I'm a feminist, I'm actually a lesbian. So when you go back to that time, you look at the word of a lesbian would be considered to be somebody who's less attractive, somebody who's behaving like a man, somebody who's actually a um, a mean person. So that's one of the things. Another young woman chimed in, agreeing. Look around, and you will see some happy women, and then you will see all these bitter, bitter women. She said, the unhappy women are all feminist. You will find very few happy, enthusiastic, relaxed people who are ardent supporters of feminists. So that image of feminists as angry and man-hating and lonely would become the canonical stands for. It's actually okay. Let me just substitute the word canonical. It says that image of feminists as angry, as man-hating and lovely and lonely would become the standard. Canonical is the standard as the second wave began to lose its momentum, and it continued. So this momentum or this standard continued. It's continued haunting the feminists today, and it was the foundation of the third wave, even the fourth wave. So when you look at why actually fourth wave or feminism today is actually failing, it's because of they consider what was said back then in the Reagan era to be true, and what actually uh, women were pictured to say to be like was this lonely, unhappy, and angry woman. So an ugly woman. They were actually so now these other feminists like the third wave and the fourth wave, they also continued in that same mindset to say that second wave, second wave is very bad. You don't want to be a second wave because second wave actually it's for people who are actually ugly, who are throwing away things that are actually beautifying us. So I want to tell you this today that if you want to be a radical feminist and you still want to stand for the beauty standards and you still want to stand with what society is actually saying, you may well understand that feminism outside it's actually failing, and you will also fail with that feminism. So what actually we are advocating for, it's the standard that actually do away, that uproots patriarchy, any system that has to do with patriarchy, and to compare what women are actually going through with the first wave and the second wave. You need to go back to the era of the Jim Crow, when the Jim Crow laws were actually put in place, when black people were dehumanized, were called were called or were they were called by names of animals, when they were actually pictured as animals that cannot even control their passions. Those were the movies that were playing in the theaters back then. That actually there's a white woman who's running away from a black man who's actually looking to rape him, to rape her. So black people in those eras, they were actually dehumanized and they were actually animalized as animals that cannot control their passions. That's why you have the Ku Klux Klan coming into the picture to save the white uh, race and the white woman. And when you look at also they compare also with the time period of the Holocaust. What Hitler did, he used the same tactics. He used the name calling, the dehumanization of people, the calling people as subhumans. Like he did the same thing that which was done even in the United States during the time period of the um, of the Jim Crow laws. So when you look at what happened at the Holocaust, and you look at what happened under the Jim Crow laws, the issue of Holocaust, it was all but racism, and racism that actually was so deeply entrenched in um, in this ideology that you have a super race and a sub race. So the Germans saw themselves as a super race, and the Jews were treated as subhumans. So today, you look at men today, they see women as subhumans and they see themselves as human. And they see themselves as the so the the prototype. So we would say they see themselves as a prototype and they see women as nothing. So with that study, I wanted to paint this picture so that we may understand the mindset behind the movement. Uguti, it is actually not coming up in 2014. It is not coming up only in 1989. It is the mindset that has been there and it's still persisting even to today. And it seems like it's actually gaining ground each day when we look at what's happening externally, when we look what's happening to the to women's rights. And yeah, let me just hold it there. Any questions and any additions? I'll just continue in the afternoon. Okay, no questions? Okay, so if there's no questions, we can, no additions? Okay, let's close with a word of prayer. We are praying. Our kind and loving God, we thank you so much for your grace and your mercy. We ask that please forgive us for the inhumane treatment that we have inflicted upon one another. And God, the sin of sexism, may you please, with your grace, help us to do away with it. May we root it out in all its forms, and may we see how we have been raised up and be able to face the reality of our ugly past and be able to stand for what is right today, for the right principles which you are actually calling us to. We surrender all and give all to you this morning and asking that please be with all your children all across the world as they are gathered in the four corners of the world. Speaking about this sensitive issue of sexism, please, oh God, prepare us for the Sunday law and may we understand our work and may we understand what we need to stand for. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.